Hello, as you know, my name is Noah. This is my informative speech for communications, and my topic is Dungeons and Dragons. Now, what is Dungeons and Dragons? Uh, well, as far as culturally, is it a cult? Some would say yes, some would say no. Both is the answer. It's not the religious kind of cult, but it's more. Well, dictionary.com states a cult is an instance of great veneration of a person, ideal, or thing, especially as manifested by a body of admirers. This can be easily related to the Grateful Dead's Deadheads. But my definition of Dungeons and Dragons is it's a fantasy role-playing game or RPG where you create characters with a group of people and then you go on missions and quests with them while trying to level up and get stronger. The big difference with this, as opposed to a lot of other games out there, is that this is through pure imagination. There's no video game or board game. It's all on pencil, paper, and in your brain. So, brief history of the game. In 1967, the main creator, Gary Gygax, formed the International Federation of Wargaming, or IFW, which allows wargame fans to collaborate on game design ideas. A few years after that, he meets his future business partner, Dave Arneson, and together they start developing the basic rules and the concepts for Dungeons and Dragons. In 1974, work on the game came to a completion and it began publication. The first 1,000 copies printed were sold out relatively quickly, almost immediately. Another 1,000 prints sold out in the next 6 months, and then a third run, which printed out 2,000 copies, sold out before the end of the year. Now, both basic and advanced box sets are also released this year. The basic set included a free set of dice, which I'll show you the dice in a little bit. But during this time, a new book entitled The Monster Manual is released, and I'll just come out here real quick and show you. This is the current Monster Manual, although the one back then was much, much different and had much, much less in it. But the one back then included about 350 monsters and helped push the game forward in popularity and influence amongst fantasy games. By 1978, the second advanced book, Player's Handbook, is released. And again, this is the modern one, but that's what this is. This is a more modern example where the old one didn't have as much in it as the current one. And then a year after that, the Dungeon Master's Guide is released, which, once again, I'll show you. This is the modern adaptation of it. And this has a lot more that your Game Master, which that's another thing I'll get to later, but more things that your Game Master can do. A few years later, in 1987, a new expansion set is released. The Forgotten Realms campaign then becomes the most widely known Dungeons and Dragons adventure. During this time, the company publishes Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 2nd Edition, which is basically just a revised edition of the first release of the game. It gives a lot more possibilities for the players and the Game Master to do. In 1997, this instrumental year in the game's history, Wizards of the Coast purchased and bought the rights from the company that previously owned the game. At this point, the game is forever changed. By the year 2000, Wizards released 3rd edition and later on a revised version called 3.5. And 3.5 goes on to become probably the most popular edition of the game, at least in the fan base. That same year, the Open Game License, or OGL, and the System Reference Document, or SRD, allows any third party to contribute and or adapt the rules of the game to recreate it in their own way. This leads to many tabletop RPGs creations. I don't know if you've ever heard of any of them, but that would be like Pathfinder is a popular one, or there's even Star Wars D&Ds out there. many other adaptations of the game. In 2008, 4th edition is released, and today it's regarded as one of the least enjoyable editions, requiring you to have an online subscription in order to fully enjoy the game. And just as a side note, it only let you level up to level 6, where most editions of the game let you go to at least level 20. So that was not really a good selling point for them. Most recently, in 2014, the new 5th edition of D&D is released and helped mark the 40th anniversary of the original edition's release. And those were the books I just showed you were 5th edition. Now on to the mechanics and characters. There's 2 different roles you can take on while playing the game. There's the player and the dungeon master. The role of the player takes on a wide variety of things and can vary from person to person. There are many different races, classes, and backgrounds to choose from. The possibilities are quite literally endless. And here, I'll show you an example of someone I created for the game, and I'll show you what the character sheet looks like. And if you want, you can pause the video at this point and you can get a good look at this. I know it's not very clear, but I can explain to you very briefly what's on this. Now, it has my character's name, which might not mean much to you, but his name is Kerbok, and that is a half-orc name. And what a half-orc is kind of like a green elf with tusks. And if you don't know what an elf is, then you should reference Lord of the Rings, because it's the best description of elves. But usually, you can do a multitude of things with your character. My guy is a fighter, which means he's very good at combat, which, just fighting things. And he also has this very heroic personality where he always wants to be the hero in this situation and just do good things and follow the rules. You can also give your character a background. My character's background is that he comes from a noble family, and he's also a knight, and he serves as king. But like I said, there's many different things you can do with it, and that's just something. If you have questions about it, you can message me personally, and I can tell you more about it. But for the sake of the speech, I have to move on. Now, as far as the dungeon master goes, or game master, depending on the game you're playing, they're the ones that create the entire world. They create the world, all the missions, quests, things like that. They pull from that Dungeon Master's Guide I was talking about, and it's basically up to them to run the game and tell players if they succeed or fail on certain things that they try to do within the game, which they use this set of dice right here. Now, I'm not going to show you all of them for the sake of time, but I'll bring them a little closer to the camera so you can see. But there's a lot of these different kinds of dice, and some of them are 20-sided, some of them are 6-sided, some of them are 4-sided. And depending on the thing that you need to do in the game, you roll the dice and it tells you what you do. Again, if you have more questions about it, just message me personally. And the last thing I want to talk about is the equipment that you start off with. Now, as far as it goes, depending on the class you choose, it determines the gear you get in the game. Some people start off with swords or spears, big hammers. Some people start off with heavy armor or light armor or no armor. Some people start off with very little equipment. Some people start off with a lot of equipment. But no matter what class you choose, there's always an opportunity to start off with some sort of adventuring pack. These packs have small, minor items that can sometimes have potential use. But like I said, they're very minor items. These would include, but aren't limited to, ropes, lanterns, torches, canteens, tents, bedrolls, food, candles, books, things like that. There's much more of that you could go into, but again, if you have questions, you can message me. But I believe that's about it. I can tell you about it. And like I said, if you have questions, just message me on Blackboard or just comment on the YouTube video below. All right, have a good day.